So I'm going to now introduce Oren Lyons as he will speak on the politics of human beings against Mother Earth, the nature of global warming. Nyawa.
Sometimes these introductions are painful. But I do thank you so much for your observations, and I appreciate that. Nawahaskano. It's our greeting. Thank you for being well. Skano, peace. Health. Thank you for being well. Nawahaskano. And you know, with that greeting, it's going to come back again and again because we are talking about peace. My mission is peace. I learned that, you know, through time and experience. Long ago, when Clan Mother approached me to accept this responsibility of helping with this title, Tahiat Kwai, blood on a wing, name of a leader 1,000 years ago. And when that leader died, his name became an office. And so a succession of leaders, a succession of Tahiat Kwais down through at least 1,000 years. It's continuity, leadership. There's 50 more with their titles. We've managed to hang on to those titles and the instructions that go with it. And I think now in these times it comes forward again with great importance, the voice of the Indigenous peoples. The voice of the Indigenous peoples are beginning to carry weight again, authority. For the simple reason is that they always had responsibility for future, and they always took the long-range view. They always had the long-term view. So when Brian talks about the peacemaker and then the instructions, every time we raise a leader in the longhouse, we hear those instructions again. We hear those laws and rules again. Takes all day. And we hear the story of the peacemaker, and we hear the wampums with their directions and their rules, and we're reminded of the duties that we have as human beings. Leaders, you know, everybody needs leaders. Leaders are always there. Even ducks have leaders. And you'll find them everywhere. You know, you stand back and you watch children playing in the age group. In a short time, you can pick out the leader in that group. And that's what clan mothers do. They watch the children grow because they know at some point they're going to have to find a leader. So they began looking very early, and they're watching these natural leaders. Could be boy or girl, doesn't make any difference, but they're there. And we learn to respect them, and we learn to talk with them. And when we want something done within that age group, we go to them. They take care of it. Show them respect, they give you back respect. The process of leadership given to us by the Creator through the peacemaker was an important event for the world, I believe, because from where I sit now in this high hill of old age, you can see far. Old Lakota man said that long ago. You can see far from the high hill of old age. That's experience, what they're talking about. So I know all the gray heads that are here have seen a lot, know a lot. And I know all the young people got a lot to learn. But in the process of living, the importance of community, the importance of relationship, all really old business with Indigenous people. I'm a wolf, my clan, and I respect that family. I'm pleased to be part of that family. And it's an important designation. We have 8 clans in the Confederacy. The Senecas have one clan that none of us have, which is the Heron clan. But our clans, starting from one house, is the turtle, the snipe, Tanya Fisher's snipe, her family's snipe clan, the beaver, and the wolf. That's one house. We sit on one side of the house. On the other side of the house is the deer, the bear, the hawk, and the eel. And then there's a mixture of them that sit in the middle. And they're called the fire keepers. We have a process. When the peacemaker approached us, he said, at a time of war, we were in fierce, fierce war. When I look at Kosovo and I saw the style of war between the Serbs, fierce, vengeance, no quarter, I said that must have been the way it was back in those days, because the men were fighting. There was a bloodlust, and the women and children were running in the woods. They were hiding from these fierce, fierce leaders, I think, who even forgot what they were fighting about. And it was at that time that the peacemaker came and brought peace between the Mohawks and the Oneidas and the Onondagas, the Cayugas and the Senecas. 1713, we brought the Tuscarora up from what is now North Carolina, and they became the Sixth Nation. And we've been together. And the rules of our association are important. Peacemaker said, your first principle of your governance will be peace. The second principle will be equity, equity for the people. And the third will be the power of the good minds. So those principles are what we've survived on. And I'm so pleased, to be asked to represent, the efforts of peace here. This is a great undertaking and much needed in this world today. But at that time, he said, these are the duties. Since the women are the same as the earth, female, then they will be holders of title, and they will be holders of your clan and your nation. They are in charge of life and water, and the men are in charge of fire. And he said about the duties, and he said the clan mother's first duty will be to choose all the leaders of her clan. And that will be agreed upon by the clan by consensus. And then this leader will then be taken to the next level, which was the Council of Chiefs. And it will be challenged again. And will be agreed upon by the Council of the Chiefs by consensus. And now he said, you have a real candidate. Because now you can send across the fire to your younger brothers, the Cayugas and the Oneidas, and now the Tuscaroras this title and say to them, we are ready to raise another leader. Good news. And they respond, same, good news. And since our house is in mourning because we have a chief down, they take care of all the work. They set the time, they pick the speakers, they pick the place. And at some point, this man that has been chosen for this title will be vetted again by each of the 6 nations who have the right of rejection. So by the time you go through this process, you begin to start wondering, what is in my back of my life that I did because I know it's going to come out? And why did I ever agree to this? And why am I standing here? Because it's true, as you know, community, somebody is always watching. And so it goes, the process of raising leaders. And he said to the clan mother, you also have the responsibility of removing that title. That is your authority and your responsibility on the issues of conduct, not on the issues of decision. So her job is to choose the leaders, remove the leaders, name all the children, and see to the health and welfare of her family, the clan. And each clan has a clan mother and these leaders. And they're the ones that sit in the council, and they're the ones that abide the rule. That's a democratic process. That's a very, very democratic process. And it was from that process that the founding fathers of America raised themselves, and we instructed them as leaders. We took them by the hand in those days and instructed them in governance and principles, a rule of law. Back 1,000 years ago, when the peacemaker gathered our people on the shores of Onondaga Lake and gave us those instructions, he said, among many other things, and every leader that we raise in the Longhouse will hear these very same things. He said, when you sit and you counsel for the welfare of the people, think not of yourself, nor of your family, nor even your generation. He said, make your decisions on behalf of the 7th generation coming. If you do that, you yourself will have peace. That's a very responsible, formidable responsibility. He said, I place in your hands now the welfare of all life. And when he said all life, he meant all life. Every bird, every fish, every deer, every tree, every flower, every bee. That's our responsibility. It's a big one. And he said to the people, do not try to influence these men. He says their work is now for the Creator, and it's as hard as it is, and being humans, they're bound to be a failure. He said, so you must have tolerance, and you must support them and help them, but do not try to influence them. He says, even as it is now, it's fairly certain that they will make serious mistakes and may never see the face of the Creator. When I heard those words, I said, wait a minute. Nobody said that to me before. But there I was, and that was in 1967. So during these years that I've been sitting there, some 40 years now, I've learned a lot. And the first thing I learned was keep my mouth shut. That was the first thing I learned. And they were helpful. The chiefs gathered around me. They knew the job, and they knew how hard it's going to be. So they were good. You know, they watched me run back and forth, run into the wall, come back and run into that wall. Finally, I slowed down. Maybe about 3 years later, I said, "Are you tired yet?" Then you begin to learn. It's a long process, but it's simple. You know, and what the peacemaker said, you know, try to be fair, equity, justice for the people, look out for them. In the instructions, he said, when people speak to you, even in anger, when you can hardly hear their words because they're yelling so loud, he says, there is still a message there, and it's your duty to hear it. And you cannot respond in kind. And he said, you must have skin 7 spans thick to withstand the assault that's coming to you from holding this position. And he said, it's not only coming from your enemies. It's coming from your family and your friends. So be prepared. And very few will thank you. But they will demand that you do your job. And so he said, among all of these instructions, and it goes on, let me tell you, he said, you are now responsible to the creation. Your first duty is to see that the ceremonies are carried out in a proper time, in a proper way. Your second duty is to counsel for the welfare of the people. And so the ceremonies are a serious part of our governance. The Thanksgivings that we give around the clock, that's how we stay strong. That's how we stay alive. That's our community. That's how we respect life. That's how we learn. That's how our children learn how to respect life. Because when your songs and your dances are there, and your grandmother is there, and the chiefs are there, and the clan mothers are there, and your family is there, then it must be right. And so you learn by watching them. That's how you learn. It makes a strong nation. When you consider the odds that we would be standing here in 2007, pretty slim. You know, if you put all of the people and counted all of our people today, we don't even equate 1% of the total population of North America. Not 1%. And yet, here we are. And we've withstood a lot, and we've been assaulted, and I think suffered more than any people in the whole world for so long. We've had a hard life, but it's been a good life. And there must be a reason why we survived. There must be a reason. And maybe it's the instructions about peace. Maybe that's why. In this current discussion, I thought it was important for you to know who we are. Because it's hard to talk to people if they really don't know who you are. So all of our people, the indigenous people, I would say, if we were to give a definition of who we are, we would say we are the people who give thanks to the earth. And that's who we are. That's our ceremonies. We look after everything, the best of our ability. I remember the speech you were talking about at the United Nations at that time, and I was wondering, what am I going to say to these people? And I thought about it, and I said, I'm here before you as a representation of our people and our beliefs and who we are. And then I said, beside me stands my brother the wolf. And we're both feared, and we're both hated, and we're both admired. But neither of us are understood. And that's who we are. We're still not understood. We're still feared. We're still hated. And we're still here. Yeah, wow. I thought it was important for me to say that at that time because I was talking to the nation states of the world. And I was talking on behalf of indigenous people around the world. We think alike. We really do. We understand. We're so grateful when an elder comes from another nation into our longhouse and speaks. Because even though we don't understand the language, we know he speaks on behalf of us. And it's wonderful. When I travel, maybe into Diné country or anywhere, if there's a wolf clan, that's my family. I open the door. Oh, you're wolf. You're our family. So these designations jump over nation lines. They're important for our people to remember who they are. Your clans are important. That's your identity. And if you are from many nations from around the world, it's also important for you to know your culture and to know your language and to know your people. It's important because it's that gives us this great strength as a human species. Variety, they say, is the spice of life. I agree with that. And variety in the species. You know, what would the world be like if all the flowers were white? Or all the flowers were red? Oh, that'd be pretty boring fast. But it's not like that. Flowers are beautiful. Trees are beautiful. They're all different. Not a blade of grass the same. That's the Creator's work. That's what they call diversity. And in diversity is strength. And a peacemaker says unity. Be united in thought and mind. One mind, one body, one heart. Strength. We had strong people, else we wouldn't be here. Very strong, great Iroquois men, formidable any time of the day or night. Formidable because they knew who they were and they defended who they were. I could say the same for the Lakota or the Cree. Formidable. Great people, great character. And of course, the women. Amazing. Community, we call it. We got to get back to that. Today's times. I think I'm supposed to be talking about global warming. And I think that's what you came to hear. Well, we get to it. Because it's not going away, you know. It's not going anywhere. It'll be there, waiting for you. But I thought we should talk a little bit about community and responsibility. Who we are. And what choices we have, what options we have today. Well, we do have a lot of options on a daily basis, and we should make them right. I think that we've forgotten a lot, but it's come because of changes. and changes that have come so fast and so strong that we're a hard time dealing with them. I say this often when I talk to people. I was 1950, I was 20 years old, and I was just having a good time. Life was good. I was just running a peak. I was playing lacrosse, I was boxing, getting drunk. Yeah. So bad my mother used to cry. But I was having a good time, I thought. That was 1950, and there were 2.5 billion people in the world then. And it took some millions of years to get to that number, 2.5 billion. 57 years ago, and today there are 6.6 billion people in the world. We have tripled our population in the world in 57 years. That's a lot of people. Every 4 days, another million people born. I'm going to deal with those figures. Leaders. I'm talking about family leaders, your leaders, mothers and fathers. You have to deal with those numbers. Got to have water, got to have food, got to have a place. There's a tremendous imbalance today and forcing issues, and that's where global warming is coming from. It's causing a compound in the north. We call it the ice. The ice is melting. How many here from far north? Well, you know what I'm talking about. Ice is melting. You know, young man over there, Hunter. You know the difference. You gotta, you know, nothing's the same anymore. You can't depend on what you used to depend on. I hear the reports from the hunters, from Alaska and from Nunavut, and from Greenland. I hear them. They talk to me personally, and they say everything is different. They say things are changing so fast, we don't know what to do. Bears are walking around when they should be sleeping. Berries are growing when they should be all picked. Flowers are up when they shouldn't be. Fish are coming at a different time. It's changing fast. And it's caused by us, no doubt about that. And so the question is well, what else is going to happen? All the ice is melting, that's for sure. And even as we're standing here speaking, the ice is melting faster and faster. There's a compound going out there. Just as we have a compound in human birth, there's a compound in the ice melt. It's a positive on positive. The faster it melts, the faster it melts. And so now you read your local papers or your international papers, and discussion always starts with, we didn't think it was going to happen so fast. Very common now. How many times have you read that? We didn't think. And this is the scientists, these are people you're depending on. And they're telling you, we didn't know. Well, we knew. In the year 2000, we gave a report to the UN. I delivered it, and I told them the same thing. The ice is melting. It's melting in the north. Pay attention. And then finally, 7 years later, it's in the newspaper. But we've lost 7 years. 7 years of options we've lost. You can't blame it on the people, actually, because people have been misdirected and they've been lied to, and it's a clever world of economy we live in today. I know about it because I worked in New York City for 10 years on Madison Avenue in advertising. So you ain't going to tell me anything about how this worked. 'Cause I used to sell you stuff. I knew how. I learned how. And that's what they do. They sell you stuff. So it's good to know the other side, and suddenly find myself here talking about things like that. But that's it. You know, we live in a world of materialism, and they talk about economic development without consequence, without direction. President of the United States says, let the market direct us. Give me a break. Market ain't got any brains. Market don't think. And yet he says, go ahead, let them direct us. That's greed he's talking about. Greed. And you want greed as a director? Well, the consequence is there. Here we are. Based on greed. I defy any one of you to tell me different. I know. I used to sell it to you. Greeting cards could do that. You really got to know the people that sell them a greeting card. But we do. So I learned, and I've been able to bring that home to the Onondaga Fire and say, here's how they do it, boys. And they say, no. I said, yeah, let's do that. They wouldn't do that. Oh, yes, they would. They do it every day. And that's what we're dealing with. And we're dealing with inequity of haves and have-nots, people without health care, people without education, working people, and also very, very, very wealthy people living beyond what you would ever believe on an everyday basis. I get to look at both sides. I've been fortunate in all of this, but the consequence that is here, is now. So the question is, what is global warming? Global warming is the impact of humanity on the nature, on the air we breathe, on the land that we live on the water that we drink. It's a pressure that we put on that. And there's a consequence to digging coal, and there's a consequence to burning it. China today has mountains of coal. And we're telling them, you can't burn that. And they said, well, you burned all the coal, didn't you? I mean, you burn coal, how come we can't burn coal? There's some truth to that, you know. There's more than some truth to it. What they said is true. But we're saying, well, if you burn coal, then you're going to affect us. I said, well, when you burn coal, you affected us too. So how do we bring a nation in this kind of a discussion together and say, we got to do something about burning coal? 2 weeks ago, I was in Switzerland, not Switzerland, but Sweden. And we were having a discussion, a very high-level discussion. And I talked with Vattenfall, and they asked me to be their keynote speaker. And they are the largest energy company in Sweden. And I talked to 80 of their consultants the day before or 2 days before. And then I talked to the leaders after. And the discussion was primarily what we're doing right here, talking about responsibility and ethics. Ethics in business. Business as usual is over. You cannot do business as usual because we're burning too many things, we're wasting too much, we're disregarding responsibility. So business has to change. And in the discussions, they said, well, how do we do that? It's such an enormous task when you look at it. But if we don't, then the consequence of that is almost beyond comprehension. We're facing a very, very fierce time. And the acceleration is moving. The faster it melts, the faster it melts. Compound. I talked to scientists. Jim Hansen, the scientist that worked for NASA and left because the Bush administration would not allow him to speak. So he just quit. He says, I have to speak because it's so important. I talked to him and I said, well, what do you see? He says, well, very matter of fact, these guys are. Well, he says, if we don't change our direction and our ways of life, he said, we're just going to push the earth into its natural reaction, and when the natural reaction comes, there's nothing you can do to stop it. So it's already started now. The ice is melting, and that's part of it. It is on its way. And what we can do now is mitigate it to make it not so bad. I talked to another very, very good climate scientist from the University of Stockholm, Carl Foke, good friend, young man. He said, yeah, he says, well, there's more than one tipping point. He says, maybe 6, maybe 7. Tipping point in the deserts, a tipping point in the forests, there's a tipping point in the mountains, there's a tipping point in the waters. And there's quite a few, he said. But he says, I think if we can work together here, we can still manage. We can still manage a better ending than what we're looking at the moment. So the responsibility then is in leadership. And going back to the raising of a chief in the longhouse, at the end of the day, when they finally stand the chief forward, and he's been accepted on all these levels, then he speaks to him about the responsibility he carries, and then he turns and speaks to the people. And the speech to the people is longer because the people have more responsibility than the leaders. It's up to the people. They're the nation. The people are the backbone of any nation, the men and the women. They're the ones that provide the strength and the power to do things. They have a responsibility, and their responsibility is to see that their leaders are moving in the right direction. So that's your responsibility. You have to get very active now, and you have to direct your leaders very vocally and very strongly, because time is a factor. So you can't sit back and say, well, maybe tomorrow, or fishing's pretty good today, maybe I'll go there. No, it's time for action. And that's my message to you, fundamentally, is that, yes, you have a duty. You have to challenge your leaders. And you have to point them in the right direction. If they're not going there, then change them. That's what the clan mother said to me. She says, if you can't handle it, get out of the way, I'll put somebody in there who can. And you've got to have integrity in leadership. And you've got to have the people's and the earth itself, health, as your mandate. And you've got to remind, that this idea of economics and economic forums, they have a different set of values. And one year I was asked to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And Dr. Schwab said, I want you to come and speak to them. I said, well, they're CEOs of the most powerful corporations in the world. I said, what in the world would they want to be listening to an itinerant Indian? What do I have to say to them? Oh, he says, you just say what you're going to say. I think it's important. Come on. So he talked me into it. But I said, I would like to make one observation before I go. I said, I would really like to take all your leaders that I'm going to be talking to, take them to the top of the Alps and keep them there for 24 hours, where the snow is flying and where it's below zero, way below. Because the Alps are right there, you just look up and there. I said, put them up there for 24 hours, then I'll talk to them. And you know why I wanted them up there. Because I wanted them to experience the reality. Because they live in a different world. They're sequestered in a room like this. They're cut off from the reality which is outside. A very powerful authority called the law, natural law. You abide it or suffer the consequence. No judges, no juries, no habeas corpus, just the law. And if you don't know it, you pay a price. That's where we are. People don't know it. We've separated ourselves from the natural world to the point where we have no relations at all. So my message is to say, you are related, you have responsibility. And as the peacemaker said, be fair, be just. Equity for the people. Well, things are not that way today. But anyway, no matter what it is, it's a squabble among a species. It really has nothing to do with Mother Earth. Because she's going to do what she's going to do. And right now, your water is going. Fires are burning. Fires are burning not only in California, Oregon, British Columbia, but almost all of Paraguay, Uruguay, and Bolivia are in flames right now, today. Have you seen it in your media? I don't think so. And why not? Because it's bad for business, that's why. That's why you don't see it. But you'll find it, go look in the internet, you'll see it. The whole of Bolivia covered in smoke. Right now, today. Fire. And drought. California water, Hoover Dam, down 100 feet. That's a lot of water. Lakes are disappearing. Yeah, this is going on. I don't know. This was free. They put it in a bottle and sold it to you. You know that? That is a fact. This is all marketing. This is what we used to do. It works, doesn't it? Billions of dollars now. Free water. Use a tap. You got good water. You got good water up here. Anyway, it's like that. Things have become easy for us. Our children haven't had to work too hard. So now they're out in the streets. Now they're playing Nintendo. Or they're not in the woods anymore. They're in front of a television set. There was a friend of mine by the name of Jerry Mander, and he wrote a book called 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. You ought to read it. They're good arguments. And you're suffering the consequence right now. Television is the best salesman that they ever made. Selling stuff to your kids, and they can sing the tunes, and they can tell you all of that. We sure know how to sell stuff. But in the meantime, after all of this, the ice is melting. As we sit here. It's not going to wait for anybody. So we are meeting, and there are meetings taking place at very high levels around the world. Last year at the Tilburg conference, the emissaries from Japan, representing the emperor, sent a message. And they said, I don't know what your agenda is, but the emperor says there's only one, and that's global warming. King of Sweden said, global warming. So leaders are talking about it, they understand it, but it hasn't reached the level of people level, the seriousness of it. And the farther north you are, the more you experience it. So the question again is, what do we do? Well, the carbon footprint that we put down as human beings is huge. In North America, we're responsible for 1/4 of all the energy in the world. And we're only 7% of the people. And we're using 1/4 of the energy. Vice President Cheney says, well, that's all right because we expend 1/4 of the energy making it. So we deserve that. That's curious philosophy. It won't fly very long in front of the ice melting. It doesn't work in the ice melting. I think universities are a source of leadership. I think universities can change, and the people in it, and the young people can energize, organize, and get to the leaders. But I think there has to be a moral voice. There has to be a moral voice, and I think the chancellors of universities could be that moral voice. They're not representative parties, they're representing people. And I think there's an opportunity here, and that we should seriously think about coalitions of chancellors and presidents, vice presidents, to get together and say, listen, we have a responsibility. I know in the United States it's a problem. My grandson was going to Bucknell University, and he had some good friends down there, and they were very spiritual people. They like to talk about things I'm talking about here. And they quit Bucknell. They left. And I was surprised because they had been there for years. And I said, why'd you leave? They said, well, Bucknell has bought into the Pentagon. They were getting money from the Pentagon. Because if you look at the expenditures in the United States, the money for military is by far the most. The money for health is down here. The money for education is here. It's all down here, but the Pentagon is here. And they hand that money out. And these two professors said they sold their soul. There's no longer a democracy. We're leaving. Bucknell, that's a really powerful school of business. And my grandson left too. I said, good son, get out. So what happens when we have these pillars of community selling out? And that's going on all over. So I think the chancellors should gather themselves and organize into a circle and be the moral voice. It's hard to assail that moral voice. When I was in having this meeting in the World Forum, he said, well, you know, he said, Dr. Schwab says, the executive committee would like you to come and address them at the lunch. I said, the executive committee? Among all these powers, there's still more power? Oh, they said, oh yes, there is. Well, what do you want to talk about? They want to ask you some questions. So, okay, so I went over. And there they were. Very nice gentlemen, I thought. And I use that word advisedly because there were no women there, it was just men. And they were wearing sweaters, no notes, no notebooks, just crossed. But they were talking about the value of the ruble. They were talking about Argentina and its economy. They were making decisions on behalf of the world right there, this group. And they were nice gentlemen. I didn't see any horns, no tails. I liked them. I got along with some of them, you know. But anyway, I said, look, I said, before you ask me a question, I want to ask you a question. I said, you understand the economy of the world. You understand that resources are finite, and yet you're using the resources as if they were infinite. You don't account for them in your bottom line. You never see the cost of resources in your bottom line. I said, why do you do that? And you know what's happening is going to lead us into real trouble. And they were quiet for a while. Then one gentleman said, "All right, Chief," he said, "I'll answer that. And I won't name the corporation, but it's huge." And he said, well, he said, "I'm a CEO," he says, "and I'm responsible to stakeholders and stockholders." He says, "They instruct me to make a profit." He said, "If I don't make a profit, I'm fired." "Oh," I said, "stockholders, that's who's responsible then?" "Well," he said, "yeah." And I said, "Well, who are they? Who are the stockholders?" He says, "That's you." "Oh," I said, "I asked a question, and I'm the culprit." "Well," he says, "do you have a retirement fund?" I said, "I do." "Then you're a stockholder." I said, "Okay, fair enough. Now let me ask you a question." I said, "Do you have any grandchildren?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I have a grandson that's 8 years old." And Monty, the guy I was just talking about, was 8 at the time. And I said, "Hey, I got a grandson that's 8. So 2 grandfathers suddenly were standing there, and we kind of puff our chests out a little bit, thinking about our grandchildren. So I said, "Okay, let me ask you another question." I said, "When do you cease to be a CEO and become a grandfather?" And I was talking about his decisions on behalf of his grandchild. And it was quiet in there, it went quiet. And I had made a huge faux pas. Huge. I had brought up a moral question in an economic forum. They don't like that. And they couldn't answer it and wouldn't answer it. It was a question on responsibility. Okay. So when do you cease to be CEO and take care of the responsibilities of a parent or a grandchild? Yeah, that's it. You have to think about that. So then, after some uncomfortable silence, he said, "Chief, we keep hearing about prophecies. I hear Indians know prophecies. Do you know any prophecies?" I said, "Oh, you come to the right place. Do I know prophecies? I know prophecies. Do I know?" "Yes, sir." I said, "How about a guaranteed prophecy?" Since I'm an Indian and I know. "Yeah, what would that be?" I said, "You guys are going to meet next year and nothing will have changed." I said, "Guarantee." That was the end of the meeting. But you see, there it is. And the equation comes down to very simple things all the time. It comes down to humanity and responsibility. And I think that in this global warming business we're involved in right now, it's not going to go away. That ice is going to melt all the way down in Greenland. That cap is going to go. I've been up there, I've looked at it, I've stood on that ice cap, and I've talked to the Inuit leaders, and they shake their head. They say our grandfather, the great white bear, the ice bear, probably has less than 20 years to live. He'll be gone. They said, we can see it, and we ourselves are struggling. They said, everybody's worrying about the bear, the bear, the bear. What about us? They said, we're having a hard time here. Our hunters can't go. They can't get on the ice. The dogs won't get on the ice. What about us? I said, good question. The ice is melting and it's going fast. You know, that ice is 2 miles thick in places, 2 miles deep. And what's happening now is as these lakes are forming on the ice and it's finding its way down underneath the ice, that ice that was frozen solid to that granite rocks, rooted right there for centuries, 10,000 years of it, there's water underneath it now. It's greasing the ice cap. And the people from Woods Hole off the Cape Cod, who look after, marine biology and so forth, they said they're afraid that there could be huge chunks of ice just calving right off and slipping into the sea. So it's not just melting anymore. There's compounding, and it's causing another effect. Oh, we didn't see that. Jim Hansen says all the animals are running. Insects are moving north. Everybody's moving, he said, because of warm. A couple of years ago in Alaska and the Kanee Peninsula, they lost 4 million acres of spruce in 1 year. 4 million acres went, killed by a beetle. He said, well, how'd that happen? Killed the trees in 1 year. Well, it got warm. Now, the beetle and the tree are symbiotic. They work together. Beetle can take 1 year of the... But what happened was, with the warming, there was 2 cycles of beetle life. Killed the trees, just like that. And that's what we call natural law. And that's what I told him in Tilburg in these forums. I said, you can't negotiate with a beetle. That's the law. It's beyond you. That's what you're dealing with. No mercy in nature, none whatsoever. Just the law. Abide it or suffer the consequence. Okay, so it's wake-up time, everybody. My message to you is we have to prepare now. We have to get ready. And we have to meet the issues, and we have to meet it collectively as a group. And on behalf of the future, on behalf of your children and your grandchildren. That's who we're trying to defend. It's our responsibility. And how do you do that? Well, there's a lot of things you can do as an individual, but basically you have to change the nature of the thinking of nation states. They're the ones that are going to have to change. We somehow are going to have to go to China and say, look, you just can't burn that coal that way, but look, we can help you. We'll devise a technology that will sequester that carbon. We'll help you. And maybe that'll work. I don't know, but you have to try something like that. You can't just draw lines, because lines don't work anymore. You have to worry about people in Africa. They're starving. The AIDS epidemic is terrible. And it's all coming here. Disease, you're going to deal with it. You're going to deal with disease, and all of this is going to be very, very democratic. Titles won't matter. We're going to be dealt with. And so, it's in our hands now. When the peacemaker laid out our whole Confederacy, he laid out all the rules, he set up the great tree of peace, the 4 white roots, he buried the weapons of war, he gave the great symbol of the eagle on top of the tree, peace, gave us so much. A woman said to him, well then, now that you've done all this, she says, how long is this going to last? And he said, that's up to you. And so when we say, how long are we going to last? How long is this university going to last? How long is our families going to last? How long is our communities, our nations going to last? It's up to us. Nobody else. It's in our hands. It's in this generation. There's work ahead, but it's not too late. I don't feel so. I'm ready for it. I'm an old man, but I'll still fight. No, I feel a lot of energy. I like to talk to the young people because they don't quit. They're not quitting. There's a fight on, and we have to get into it. We have to be courageous. We have to step beyond the bounds that we've made for ourselves. We have to speak out. Leaders have to come forward. Family leaders, community leaders, leaders in universities, leaders in the nation. We have to work together because this is the only way you're going to deal with global warming. It's a collective issue, it's a global issue, and we all have to do it together. But it can be done. Time is short, so it makes the heart fighter, that's all. That's all. I'm ready. Our council is ready. Our men are ready. Our women are ready. You know, we have to get alert, and we have to make a commitment, and we have to learn about it, and we have to get to the leaders. And that's up to the people. That's up to you.